Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca, and this is my review on the 49-key Roland A-49 MIDI controller. This controller currently sells for about $300 US and is absolutely perfect for my needs, and I love it. But it might be totally wrong and a waste of money for your needs. Let's check it out and talk about why. So the vast majority of people that buy MIDI controllers are going to be connecting their MIDI keyboard to an app on a device, so a phone, tablet, or a computer. Usually a DAW app, so a digital audio workstation, or DAW, to record music. These apps are going to have sounds built into them, so when you play your keyboard, it will trigger whatever sounds you have selected within the app. So you could use your keyboard to play a piano sound or a guitar sound or whatever. Examples of DAW apps would include GarageBand, Ableton Live, FL Studio, etc. So when these people are shopping for a MIDI controller, they are often looking for how well does this keyboard work with certain DAW apps. So the buttons, knobs, sliders, and pads on the keyboard all get automatically mapped to the appropriate controls in their favorite DAW app. So that's important because it can make your life much easier not having to map all these controls manually. And to many of these players, these features can even be more important than how good is the key action. There are a lot of MIDI controllers out there that have tons of great features, fantastic DAW integration, but not great and in some cases downright awful key actions, especially in the $300-ish price range. I've tested two other popular MIDI controllers in this price range, the M-Audio Oxygen Pro and the Arturia Keylab Essential. They both have far more features and configurable onboard controls like sliders, knobs, buttons, and drum pads than the Roland A-49 does. And they both, the Arturia in particular, have much fancier built-in DAW integration. But the key action? The Oxygen Pro key action is okay for the price. While it's not ideal, I could probably get away with using that key bed in a performance situation. But the key bed on the Arturia, it's really not that great. There's no way I would try using that live with my band. So what are the other people, or the vast minority, going to be using their MIDI controller for? Well, instead of connecting their MIDI keyboard to a device with an app on it, these people are going to be connecting their MIDI keyboard to another keyboard. And why would you want to do this? Well, there's a few reasons. First off, this isn't something you can do with just any keyboard. The keyboard you're connecting to must have a MIDI in port. This is something you often find in stage pianos or stage keyboards. And your MIDI controller keyboard really should have a 5-pin MIDI out port. Many of the cheaper ones don't. They only have USB MIDI out. Now you can still use that port to control another keyboard, but you will need a converter box like the Do-Re MIDI to do that. I did a review on the Do-Re MIDI that I'll link to in the description below. So when you connect a MIDI controller with a MIDI out port using a 5-pin MIDI cable to your main keyboard, you're going to be able to trigger the sounds on your main keyboard using the MIDI controller's keybed. So as an example, my Yamaha YC-61 stage keyboard can play 3 sounds at once, one from the organ engine and then 2 other sounds. And they can all be layered together, they can be split across different parts of the keybed, etc. But with only 61 keys, there isn't a ton of real estate for multiple sounds. For example, in my band, I'm often playing piano in my left and organ in my right with a keyboard split. And then my band says, hey, can you throw in a sax solo? Well, that's where an external controller becomes super helpful. Instead of trying to split my 61 keys into a third zone, I can assign that third sound, the saxophone, to just the external keyboard, so I still have the full 61 keys available on the YC-61 for organ and piano. So another reason that people might use MIDI controllers to control other keyboards is to get the best of both worlds as far as key action is concerned. For example, my YC-61 has organ-style semi-weighted waterfall keys, which I don't mind playing piano pieces on, but more piano purist players might prefer to have a fully weighted and graded hammer action keybed for piano pieces. So to do that, they could buy a MIDI keyboard with a fully weighted and graded hammer action and connect that to the YC-61 to trigger the amazing piano sounds on the YC, and then just use the YC's keybed for organ and synth kinds of pieces. Or same thing the other way around. If your main keyboard had a fully weighted and graded hammer action, but you wanted to play some organ songs or synth songs with a lighter action, then you could get a MIDI controller with a semi-weighted or more organ-friendly action and connect it to your main keyboard and use it for the organ sounds. So for the customers like me that are looking for a MIDI controller to connect to other keyboards, for these players, the quality of the key action is very important, much more so than any fancy DAW integration features. So that brings me to which of these customers am I, and why did I buy the Roland A-49? Well, if you follow my channel, you probably already know I am not an expert on MIDI controllers, and I rarely use DAW software. When I have to, I use GarageBand on my iPad, but I only know just the bare minimum about it. So I definitely fall into that second minority group of users who are looking for a MIDI controller to control their keyboards. So with that in mind, what were the most important features for me when looking for a MIDI controller to play those extra sounds on my Yamaha YC-61? Key action's definitely the most important. Portability, a 5-pin MIDI out port, and I also wanted both a sustain pedal and an expression pedal port. A lot of inexpensive MIDI controllers only have a sustain pedal port. So I knew from the specs online that the Roland A-49 met all of the technical needs. It's crazy portable. It only weighs 5 pounds, and because it has a very minimalist user interface and only 49 keys, it's also super narrow, shallow, and thin. It does have the 5-pin MIDI out port, as well as the usual USB MIDI out, and it has both a sustain pedal port and an expression pedal port. And that's important for me to have for playing both organ and piano. But what about the one feature that you never know until you try, the key action? When I ordered my A-49, I was super hopeful because a lot of online reviews and blogs really praise this key action. Roland markets the A-49 as a super portable MIDI controller with pro-level key action. And a lot of organ players say it's great because the keys have slightly rounded corners, which should make organ slides and palm smears much smoother and easier. So how do I like it? I love it. This key action, in my opinion, is miles better than the key action on any other MIDI controller in this price range that I've tried. The keys are synth-style diving board keys, and while they aren't weighted or semi-weighted, they do offer a fair bit of resistance. They actually feel semi-weighted. They are extremely playable, they respond really, really well, and it's really easy to control your dynamics. And above all of that, they feel very solid and very high quality. There's no side-to-side movement at all. They just feel really well built. And the comments online about the rounded corners are 100% correct. They really help with playing organ-style songs by making palm smears or glissandos smooth, easily controllable, and comfortable. Now, they are synth full size, which is slightly narrower than most digital pianos, with an octave width of about 159 millimeters, as opposed to most digital pianos, which are about 164. This is something I've mentioned a lot on my channel, and can be, often for some people, challenging to go back and forth between the two octave widths. But my main keyboard is now a Yamaha YC-61, which also has the narrower octave width of 159 millimeters. So now that I'm becoming used to a narrower octave width, the fact that the A-49's is the same makes moving back and forth between these two keybeds really easy. I'm going to be totally comfortable playing piano, organ, or any other voice on this keybed in a performance situation with my band.
Can I get a witness? I miss hurricane, can't keep your hands still long enough to count your change. You were right in your daily grind. The guys are living, it didn't even cross your mind. Now you mystified, standing with the rest of us who used to rule the world.
Now, another thing I really like about the A-49 is the big and clear octave shift and transpose buttons. You hit the plus and the minus to move up or down octaves. The cool thing is you also get these indicator lights that are telling you quite clearly what your current setting is. So I'm up 2 octaves right now. If I'd gone down octaves, it's also kind of cool because these lights are going to work from the top instead of the bottom. And then for transposing, if I hold down the transpose button, these lights are going to go away because now it's reflecting the transpose setting instead of the octave setting. If I start transposing up, when I transposed, you're going to see the transpose is lit up, so it tells me that I am transposed. And then if I want to see how much I'm transposed, I can press the button, and then it's going to show me that I'm up 4. When I let go, though, see how this goes out? I'm not transposed anymore, but this is actually kind of cool because you can switch back and forth really quickly if you need to. If you have a transpose setting configured already, like I just did, then I can quickly just transpose by pressing that button. So super, super cool. And the other thing that's awesome about this is that it's so clear what your current settings are. And so easy to access them and change them. That's great for using this kind of a keyboard in a live situation. Now here's a quick demo of a setup I have for one of the songs with my band. I've got 3 sounds set up on my Yamaha YC-61. I've got a saxophone split on the left side of the keyboard. I've got piano on the right. And then I've specified what my third sound is going to be, which is a Hammond organ, but it's not being controlled at all by the keys on the YC-61. I've set it up so that the organ sound is only going to be controlled by the external keyboard. So in this case, the Roland A-49. Let me fix these octave and transpose settings here. So the third voice is only going to be triggered by the keys on the A-49. So even for organ, this key action is really impressive. Like these organ slides are super smooth and easy to do with those rounded key edges. So what about customizable buttons, knobs, etc.? While the A-49 doesn't have all the drum pads, sliders, and buttons that the competition has, it does have 2 customizable buttons, S1 and S2, and 2 customizable knobs, C1 and C2. Now, while I'm not going to be using the A-49 with a DAW most likely, I could also configure those knobs and buttons to control things on the YC-61. To be honest, I probably wouldn't actually bother doing that since I'll have the YC and all of its buttons and controls right in front of me anyways, but I'll demo it either way because this is just a good demo of how to set up custom CC numbers on these controls for whatever you're using the A-49 to control, whether it's another keyboard or an app or some software. So I'm going to set up the S1 button to toggle the rotary speaker speed on the YC-61. So just so you know what you're looking and listening for, if you look down here, this is indicating these flashing lights that the rotary is going slow, and this button just indicates that it's on slow. So if I play the organ and I hit this button, moves it to fast, back to slow. So let's set this up on the A-49. So to do that, I have to look up what the CC number, which is CC stands for control change. So I looked that up in the YC-61's manual, and the number for that is 85. So to assign that to the S1 button, I'm going to press Function, and then S1, and then the control change key. And then I use the numeric entry keypad over here on the right-hand side with these keys to enter 85. And then I have to choose either latched or momentary. Latched means leave the setting there, and momentary means only change that setting when you're holding down the button. And I do that with the plus and minus keys. So plus is latched and minus is momentary. I'm going to use plus because I just want it to stay there when I hit it. So let's test this out. So you can see that's working perfectly. And you can even, just to give you another quick example, I'll set up S2 to turn the reverb on or off on the YC. So I'll go Function, S2, Control Change, and I've looked up in the YC manual that for reverb it's 91, and then I'll switch that to latched as well. So you can hear the reverb on, and then off. So that's super easy and super cool. So now let's customize the C1 and C2 knobs to do something. Now, a lot of MIDI controllers will have sliders that you can map to, in this way, to the drawbars on your organ. But I'm just going to use that as an example with these two knobs to adjust the last two drawbars on my YC. So to do that, I'm going to press Function. Then you just move the knob that you want to use. So I'm going to do this with C1, so I'm just going to move this a little bit. And then I press Control Change. And then I press the number for this second last drawbar, which I looked up in the manual is 109. And then I just press Enter. And then now, when I work C1, this second last drawbar should move up and down. So that works super well. And I could do the same thing with C2 to another drawbar or to the volume or to any other control that I can look up the CC number for in the YC's manual. So not a ton of assignable controls, but at least there's some. And this process is exactly the same whether you're setting up the A49 to work with another keyboard like I am, or whether you're setting up to work with an application. You just look up the CC number in the app for whatever you want to control and then assign it to one of the two buttons or the knobs on the Roland. Now there are some other controls on here as well. There's a pitch bend joystick that also doubles as modulation when you move it forward. Not sure the modulation's set up on the organ on the YC, but anyway, you can move that forward and use that as modulation. And there's also a button labeled Supernatural. This is actually used for telling the A49 that you're connected to something with a Roland Supernatural sound engine. Then it configures the A49 to work well with that. This isn't something I bothered looking into at all, so if you're interested in more info on this, just check it out online. Then the final control to talk about is a very unique, and I think, to be honest, kind of gimmicky and a bit goofy control, which is the Roland D-Beam controller. This might be, I guess, more applicable to synthesizer players, and I don't really play synth at all. But this controller senses movement, and so if you have the pitch button selected, for example, when I hold down a note, and then I move my hand close, you're going to hear the pitch change. And if I change it to the volume, so kind of cool, I guess, but probably not something that I'm ever likely to use. One other thing to quickly mention is MIDI controllers like the Arturia Keylab Essential typically have the ability to save multiple configurations and setups, which is awesome. I don't see any such functionality with the Roland A-49, but I did confirm that the A-49 will remember its last setup when you turn it on. So at least if you're always using it with the same app, software, or other keyboard, any customization you've done to the configurable buttons or knobs won't have to be redone every time you power it on. So before I sum up this review, I do have some complaining to do, and also possibly some very useful information for people who have recently purchased a Roland A-49. When I took the A-49 out of the box, I was super easy to test it out, so I connected it to my Yamaha YC-61 with a MIDI cable and used the USB cable to plug it into a power outlet. And nothing, no power. So I thought, is my cable no good? So I tried another, nothing. Then I tried connecting the USB cable from the A-49 to the USB A port on my YC, which should also supply power. Nothing. Then I used a lightning connector to connect it to my iPad, which should also supply power to the keyboard. Nothing. I looked through the manual. There's absolutely nothing about this, so then I started looking around online. I eventually discovered this. The A-49 out of the box is configured only to function, which includes receiving power, if it is connected to a computer that has the Roland driver downloaded and installed. So if I had connected the A-49 to my computer instead and had downloaded and installed the driver, I would have been fine. But to use the A-49 as a controller for another keyboard or for an iPad, you have to switch the default driver the keyboard is looking for from the Roland one to a generic MIDI compliant one. You do this by holding down Function, Assign, and Pitch when you power on the keyboard. And then it works just fine as a controller for my YC-61. This to me is kind of crazy. I have never seen another MIDI controller not get power without some kind of bizarre configuration step before, especially when there's absolutely nothing about this in the manual. I actually found numerous posts and videos online with some very angry and frustrated people who were convinced the keyboard could only work with a PC. I even reached out to Roland to ask them about this, and their response was fine, actually. It was to apologize, and they did totally own up to the fact that they should have had this clearly included on page 1 of their manual. They also said the A49 is supposed to ship with a card that includes all of this info. Mine did not. So then I connected the A49 to my iPad, and sure enough, the iPad provided power to it. So I loaded up my IK Multimedia Hammond B3 app, but the app wasn't recognizing the keyboard. None of the keys worked. Well, yet another bizarre configuration that you need to just know. To use the A49 with an iPad, you have to hold down S1 and S2 when powering on the keyboard. Then, works just fine. And FYI, to use the A49 with a computer, whether it's a PC or a Mac, you have to press Function, and then the ADV key, which is right there. And then if the plus sign doesn't light up, you have to press it so that it does light up, and then download and install the driver for your computer, and it'll work fine. So the verdict on the Roland A-49. Like I said at the start of this review, it totally depends on your needs. For me, this keyboard is perfect. It has a fantastic key action for the price. It has MIDI out so that I can connect it and use it as an extra set of keys with my Yamaha YC-61. It has both expression and sustain pedal inputs, and it's insanely portable at only 5 pounds, as well as being just super narrow and slim and thin. I can even comfortably fit the A49 on my kitchen table in between my MacBook keyboard and the monitor so that I can use it with online piano or organ lessons. And while I almost never use DAW software, if I was to start doing that, I'd rather have something with a good quality playable key action than something with a bunch of assignable knobs and faders that had poor key action. And on the topic of DAW apps, the A49 does currently come with a subscription to Ableton Live Lite if you're interested in that. Now, on the other hand, if you are wanting a keyboard with all the knobs, faders, drum pads, and controls that's going to integrate better with your favorite DAW software, then the A49 probably isn't for you. But with all that in mind, for someone like me looking for a portable MIDI controller that has a really good key action, I have to highly recommend the Roland A-49, even with the goofy startup issues I came across. I think it's ridiculous it didn't just work as a controller for my YC-61 right out of the box, but now that I know how to set it up for either that or to use with my iPad, not really a big deal. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you like the content, please feel free to smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. That does really help me out. I've left links below to check out current prices on the Roland A-49, as well as some links to some other relevant videos. And as usual, I've also included links to online piano training that worked really well for me that I can highly recommend. So thanks again for stopping by. Happy MIDI keyboard shopping, and have an awesome day.